You're listening to the Build Your Business podcast, powered by Turnkey Coach, where we help business owners find freedom over fear.
I'm Matt Reynolds.
And I'm his brother, Chris Reynolds.
Join us as we help build your business and move from fear to freedom together. You're listening to the Build Your Business podcast. I'm your co-host, Matt Reynolds, here with my brother, Chris Reynolds. We missed you last week because crap hit the fan.
Yes, it did. That's what happens.
Which is what we're going to talk about. So we sent emails out to producers and Radcast and everybody that helps with the podcast and said, hey, this is probably not going to happen this week. We've tried a whole bunch, and we were going to talk about the game plan, which we'll talk about next week because we led into that last week or week before last. But I think this is a really good topic for business owners is when crap hits the fan. Yeah. And we'll try to use the word crap as much as we can because it's clean. This is a family show.
Family show.
And so,
your kids can listen and learn how to start their business.
That's right. And if we say something we're not supposed to, we'll just bleep it out. So the reality is, I said last week, really short podcast, is that you and I are both business owners. When you're really legitimately both business owners, sometimes crap hits the fan. Sometimes you have emergencies. Sometimes you stay up all night long working on a tech issue or whatnot. And I thought, while it's fresh in our mind, let's talk about how we've handled some of those scenarios over the past 20 years when crap hits the fan, when everything goes crazy and you have to really pull weeds on everything else, which included this podcast last week. So as much as you can give detail, because from what I understand, it wasn't really you guys' fault. What was last week like for you?
I think what I'll do is I'll describe this type of scenario because it's not super uncommon for our business. We're typically brought in to help companies, and I'm in particular brought in to lead through very intense change inside of engineering organizations. And so this is typically in any kind of company that has an engineering group, and they have a bunch of stuff that's going on, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of it or change, or maybe it's just scaling. They're trying to scale, and the move from where they are right now to their scaling point is it's a big lift, and they need a lot of help to do it. And so that's typically what I'm involved in. And because of the nature of that, things that look like emergencies or look potentially catastrophic during some of those changes is almost commonplace. Like, it's not that rare for me. So last week was a really good example. I think when I talk about particulars, I'm going to talk about particulars of other examples just for the anonymous nature of what I do. The reality is, here's what happens. You end up with a situation that is unexpected, right? It's not a thing.
By the way, what time did that happen last week?
So I was made aware of this particular event at probably around 4 p.m., maybe 3:30, 4 p.m.
Yep.
And so when this happens, you find out there's a thing, we got to do something about it. And it's always, there's sort of two constraints that are really important. One of them is you or your client, your customer, or your customers all see this as a pretty big deal, right? Yep. So it feels like it could be a really critical turning point in the company's history, and, to bad or good, really, in either situation. It's probably rarer for me to be involved in one where if you push crazy hard, like through a all-nighter, 24-hour, 48-hour day, whatever, that there's just something amazing on the other side of it. That does happen. Like there are times certainly when you got investors that are like, if you can do this thing, we're going to hand you an enormous pile of money. It's like, okay, well, we gotta jump on it and do it. And so those circumstances show up, but more frequently it's a circumstance where something is pretty intense, and the probability of something really negative happening is pretty high. And the most important part about it is it's super time constrained. So the way that I always think about it is it's like the clock is ticking. If you ever watch the show 24, it's like that. Basically, It's like tick, 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 tick. And I hear this in my head.
It's hyper urgent and hyper important.
And that's exactly what it feels like. Like, it's this very sort of intense moment. And so it almost always hits in a time frame where you become aware that like, oh, this is going to happen. This is one of those days, and it's always between 4 and 6 p.m. that you find out. So you get to whatever day you had is over. We're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, and I think, especially as I thought about this podcast and what I could help other people do and learn in it, is I've done this so much that I feel like there are a lot of lessons, a lot of takeaways that I think could be really helpful for other founders. And while my example is in the tech space, I actually think this works in basically in anything.
Sure.
Where you have the same kind of intensity. So,
well, first off, you got this emergency, at 4 or 5, 6 p.m. And then you were up all night long, and I assume a lot of your staff trying to fix a tech problem that was not something that you created, but something that you had to be brought in to clean up.
Right. And actually, these circumstances are interesting because sometimes this happens and nobody changed anything. So the last 2 of these events that I've had in the last 3 to 6 months or whatever have both been circumstances where nobody changed anything, and it actually wasn't the fault of anyone that we were in direct contact with.
Sure.
It was an example of a situation. Like, I think the first one was a third party that is completely unrelated, had sort of a breakdown situation. And so we had to scramble very quickly to get around that problem. And then this one was actually just a certain level of scale got hit. And as that scale got hit, it had never been hit before. And, the system hadn't really been pressure tested as highly as it should have been. And so there was a little bit of work to do there. But no one's direct fault in this case. It was just the emergency is on us, and now we got to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, we hire you guys to do a lot of dev work for us, and Barbell Logic Online Coaching, Turnkey Coach, utilizes the Turnkey Coach software, and we've had 1 or 2 times where it just stops working, like it breaks. And clients can't upload videos for strength coaching, coaches can't give feedback, and we've had a couple of these over the past couple of years as well, where the day-to-day process of the business stops,
right,
until the tech is fixed,
right.
And so you are, as you've said in previous podcasts, you are a problem solver. You have to go in and solve the problem and figure out how to fix the tech and get it back up and running.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I mean, I can't tell you why. I can't pin it to a particular thing, but I can say with pretty close to 100% certainty that I was born to solve these kinds of problems and lead through this kind of change. I have a personality that is set up for handling this. I'm calm when things are crazy, and that's a really critical piece. We'll talk about that here in a second, but I think there's a lot about probably that I found my way into this space also, and into SaaS and all the things that I've done over the history of my business career. But I think part of it is just that there's a lot of it in this space. It's almost always around tech. Like most businesses have so much around tech, and tech is so complicated. So there's just like 100 million moving parts. Can you just imagine? Like, it's almost more of a miracle that we get any of it working at all, right? there's electrons flowing around in wires, and we get that to turn into the internet and apps on our phones and stuff. So super complex ecosystem, and I think it's part of the way these things work.
Yep, makes perfect sense. I've had a few of these in my business that is not tech specific. So when I got bought out of Strong Gym, my first company, it was kind of an overnight thing. I remember meeting with my 2 other business partners, so 3, and we sat down in the attorney's conference room. The attorney represented everybody, so he said, I'm going to leave because it's a conflict of interest, and I want you guys to try to work it out. And pretty quickly, we realized 2 of the 3 of us were going to get bought out of the company. And this was in 15. And so, okay, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Right. So that was one. I had one where when we started Barbell Logic, we were associated with another name in fitness. And that we licensed out that name, and they pulled our license with no lead time. It was just like, you don't have a license to use this anymore. That was a tech piece. luckily, we were in a position for several months that we kind of refer to in the company as the Cold War. So we kind of prepared for if that happened. We had a mirrored site with an updated logo brand, all that sort of stuff that we could just kind of flip the switch. I remember waking up the next morning, working through most of the night, and then waking up the next morning, and we had flipped the switch so fast that the internet world and Reddit and everything thought that we had left that company and kind of had a mutiny and did our own thing. That's not at all what happened. I also have to be careful because there's a lawsuit there that I can't speak about the details of the lawsuit, but about a month after we lost the license, we had a lawsuit that their attorneys came back and said, here are 473 things on the internet that we want taken down where it associates you and your company with this other company. And so my attorney called me and he said, hey, this is all your content, but if you can pull it, if you can get it off the internet in the next 24 hours, they don't have a lawsuit.
Yep.
There's nothing left.
That's an example. That's a great example.
Yep. So my COO, Andrew, he created a document that he called Searcher, which I know nothing about, but I'd actually type, this is like a mythological creature. The idea there was, I can remember I was in Mexico and it was a Friday afternoon, again, at 4 or 5 p.m. And I had an all hands call on a Friday night. And I said, we're working all through the night. And in the morning, when we wake up, all of these things are going to be pulled off the internet.
Yep.
It was 473 things. A lot of things.
Yep.
And so we did it. And when we woke up the next morning, it was gone. Like everything they'd asked for was gone. And so without going into any more detail, those are the things that occur sometimes as a business owner that you're just like, it doesn't matter what time of the day or night it is. It doesn't matter whether you're on vacation or not. Everybody's all hands. We're all working together and we're solving this problem to get it fixed as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So that we can get back to homeostasis.
That's right. That's exactly right. And there's so many, it's funny, I think most founders have been through this to some degree at some point in time. But almost everybody reflects back positively on these things, which is kind of crazy. Like you think about what you have to go through and the intensity of it. And it's not like you would wish that you would have that intensity on a regular basis or anything like that. But it's just that there are some really incredible things that come out of it. And I think one of those things is it is usually a time of hyper learning.
Yep.
There is just a period of time when the whole rest of the world is completely faded away. I mean, you've had to, and I'm going to go through some steps to tell you how to deal with this that I actually think part of this is by design. You have to go in there, you have to actually stop all the other stuff. This is the only thing you can be focused on during that time. But I think while that's happening, I think you just get this incredible deep focus and you can learn faster than during other times.
The concept of, probably everybody's heard of this, the college professor who has the jar and he puts the big rocks in the jar and he's like, is the jar full? And the college kids say yes. And then he puts in pebbles.
Yep.
He says, is it full now? And they say yes. And he puts in sand. Is it full now? Yes. And he pours water in it. Is it full now? And this is not the concept of the video, but I would make an argument that there are times you have to break the jar.
Yeah.
And go to the singular big rock.
Yep, that's right.
All the other rocks, all the other pebbles, the sand, the water, all the stuff has to go away. And the singular focus of the entire business is the big rock.
That's right.
Because that's the emergency, right?
I mean,
and so
that's what it is, right? I think how effectively you do this or don't do this is essentially, these are clutch moments in the history of the business. And so you have to be the kind of person who can show up to that clutch moment and not fold and not panic and not do all the things that a lot of people do. A lot of things that feel super intense and I think cause people to make mistakes during this time are really what you're looking to avoid. So
yep.
I also say, I think you build a lot of credit, long-term credit from a leadership perspective from your staff during this time, because they're seeing you as a wartime CEO for all practical purposes. And I mean, that feels almost like, there's hero status, and it's weird, but it does work that way. Again, you don't want it for that reason. That's not why we're doing this kind of thing, but it does yield some benefits that are pretty impressive and very helpful.
Yeah. These are not the only times we've had to deal with this, right? Like almost every founder deals with a time when they are running out of money, capital.
Yep.
You don't know how you're going to make payroll in 7 days. And that's the only thing you have to do. Like as a CEO, as a founder, like the checks can't bounce.
That's right.
That's the deal.
Can't run out of cash.
Yep. You can't run out of cash. And so those things are incredibly important. And then piggybacking off of what you just said is that what I have found. So while I wrote an entire book called Undoing Urgency, there's a section in that book, I think it's on like page 67, I think, as I was peeking at it this morning, is that there are times when hyper urgency is healthy.
Yep, that's true.
And that my experience is that when those times come, if they don't come every 2 or 3 months, but they come once in a great while, once a year, once every 2-3 years, whatever, those hyper urgent, hyper important times are when we look back now with these kind of rose-colored glasses, nostalgia, they were the most galvanizing times of the entire company.
Yeah.
And this story is really all laid out. I'm sure we've mentioned this book so far on the podcast, but The Hard Thing About Hard Things with Ben Horowitz, it's my favorite business book because the vast majority of business books are written by guys who are super successful. Ben Horowitz, super successful, is one of the founders of A16Z with Andreessen Horowitz, so one of the big venture capital, now private equity firms. But there were several times that they were within 24 hours of death.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point, you find out like who's really on the team. And what tends to happen is everybody's on the team, or 98 or 95 or 90% of the people are on the team, and the ones that aren't leave. And now you've got your galvanized team that everybody's focused on a singular task. And so when we attacked the 473 things that had to be pulled off the internet for the lawsuit, by the time everybody woke up the next morning, it was gone.
Right.
But no individual pulled all 473. We divvied up. We had a very clear system and SOP for how we were going to do that, report on it. And in the end, when we look back, we were like, this is an incredible galvanizing experience. So you've got when hyper urgency is actually healthy, and I think that should happen occasionally for a business. You have the concept that you mentioned of the wartime CEO. And I would argue that you hear all the time about wartime CEOs and peacetime CEOs. And I think that concept is relatively crap because I think no one ever remembers the peacetime CEO. Nobody remembers the peacetime generals. When we go to war, you remember Patton, and you remember these generals that were the best of the best in the most dire circumstances, all the way back to Washington, let's say.
Yep.
And so nobody remembers what it was like to be a great general or a great leader during good times. It's what does it look like to be a great leader during the bad times, and bad is probably an understatement, during the 24 hours of do or die time.
Yep.
How can you do that? And so you started to kind of tease into this concept of like staying calm and solving problems. So when that situation arises, how do you rise to the occasion and get the job done?
Yeah. All right. So there are a couple of things that I feel like can really help when it comes to navigating a crisis. And I think that the very first one is the most important of all. And that is you need to stay completely calm. And the reason for this is that it is not possible to think clearly and to make good decisions in a state of heightened emotion.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
Panic mode.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
And so we've talked a lot about this on the podcast, and I think this in many ways gets down to maybe one of my big core ethos things. It's the reason that we train our emotions or train our responses to our emotions, right? Because we can't do anything about our emotions, but we can do something about the way we respond to our emotions. And the more we feed the hysteria, the worse it gets. So it is far better to learn how to have a thing like that. You're going to have a moment of panic. I've done this so many times, and I can still tell you that at that 4:30 p.m. time, when I know that I'm supposed to have dinner with my family at a particular time, I maybe had an event I was supposed to go to with my kids, I have a moment of panic too.
Sure.
And that moment lasts for about 3 seconds. That's how long it lasts.
Right.
I have it. I acknowledge that I'm having it, and I move the hell on. That's what I do.
Right.
Because I have to. Because we're in the middle of a war and now it's time to go to war, right?
Yep.
So staying calm is really, really, really critical. And I actually think this is a useful personality trait for literally everyone. I think everyone can work on it in various ways. I will admit that I'm sure there are people whose personalities are naturally tuned to it, some that are not. And so, probably something to be aware about yourself if you're a CEO and this is a real struggle. I think this is an area where you want to make sure that your number two in command is as calm as can possibly be, because they need to be in the middle of the storm. Immediately after you sort of got yourself calm, it's let the right people know that you are in the middle of a crisis. So this is a pretty basic thing, but you need to tell your spouse, might need to tell your kids, you need to tell, whoever on the team needs to know. Ideally, one of the people that's really helpful, if you have one, is anyone at all in your organization. This doesn't need to be like an executive assistant. I'm not even advocating for executive assistants, but I would say someone who can go in and clear your calendar for the next 24 hours.
Yep.
That is absolutely a must. One of the things that will absolutely crush you is the idea that you've got to do a 24-hour overnighter, or you got to go through all this stuff. And then also, I've got all these other critical things that I've got to deal with.
This was last week, and we had to do a podcast.
Yep.
And you were like, dude, I've been up all night long. I don't know how long it's going to take to free this up. And so we started to look at, okay, well then how do we manage the podcast while Chris is in emergency, urgent, and important mode?
Yeah.
And that's why the podcast didn't come out on Friday, because we're not primarily content producers and podcast makers. We're business owners. And so you had a critical thing you had to deal with that then didn't just elevate it above everything else, but actually pulls the weeds of everything else. Okay, there's no more baseball games for the kids. There's not dinner with the family. There's not sleep at night. There's no podcast in the morning. It is one big rock. Yeah. That's it. That's what I'm focusing on.
I always feel like if you pull sleep at night, you better be pulling everything else. So
right.
That's a pretty critical piece of the puzzle. But you get to this point where you're ready. Okay, now what do you do next? Well, the next thing that you do is you gather a bunch of facts. Okay, so you've got to get all the facts about the situation written down somewhere. Now, people do this a bunch of different ways. If you are in a physical office with a group of people, a great way to do this is with a whiteboard. One of the things that I tend to recommend to people, and sort of goes hand in hand, is to start what we call a war room. And a war room in a physical office is an office. Pick an office, pick a conference room. Everybody's going to go in that space, and you get everybody there. In a virtual office, which I actually like many times better than a physical office in this situation, and have done this many, 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 many times this way. We use Slack, but if you use something similar, you can do the same thing. You create a new channel, and that channel is literally called War Room or such and such War Room or whatever. And all the people are in there, and it is the only thing they're paying attention to.
That's right.
It is the only place we're going to get alerts, and we don't change channels during that time. We're not looking at emails. We're not doing anything else. We are focused completely on this one space. So gather all the facts. One of the things that I do just as an internal trick is I'm a programmer. And so one of the things that I will do is I will actually make a Python project, because it's a tool that I can use to think. And it's a superhuman tool. It gives me the ability to do things like go get a bunch of data with a tool that I can write crazy fast, right? I've been doing this for 25 years. So I am insanely fast at Python. And I can make these little markdown scripts, which are kind of like, I don't know, they're like really fast HTML or something. It's like this really fast way to document things in a hierarchical way. Every time a crazy war thing happens, I start doing that. I document. I start getting all the details down in a place where I can see them, I can organize them, I can think about them in different ways. And you'll always want to do the same thing. Again, if you're in a physical, one of the easiest ways to think about this, is if you're in a physical office, this is in a conference room with a big old whiteboard, and you got people there and you're writing stuff down on the whiteboard. After that, the key next step is to gather the right people. So ideally, maybe right off the bat, you know about a couple of them, but you need to maybe reevaluate, like, who are the experts that I need that are to help me solve this problem. By its very nature, an emergency event of this type is not a one human event.
Right.
You need a team to execute, because it won't be true that you will be the expert in every possible way. In fact, in many times, you aren't the expert at all. You are merely the leader. You're the person who is beating the drum, who is keeping calm, who's doing all the things that needs to happen in order to lead the team through the crisis. But one key role, and I think this is really important, I learned this many, many years ago, one key role is somebody to take care of communication. And so I call this comms, but essentially your communications person needs to never or almost never need to ask the team anything. They are in that war room to observe and take notes. There's going to be a lot of chaos and a lot of weird things that are being said inside of that room that are not ready for public consumption, but you have outside stakeholders that you're trying to talk to. Matt, in your case, you're talking to a lawyer, right? You got an attorney that you need to talk to or whatever. So like in that case, what you really need is someone who can observe. They're very good at figuring out, how do I clean this communication for an outside audience? And that allows you to stay focused, because it is its own task to do the thing, to help lead through the crisis and to communicate about that thing. You don't want to have extra cycles in your brain trying to figure out how you're going to word it just right. That's one person's job, and you give them that role.
And so the other thing I want to touch on, because it's not innate for you or for I, is that when these times come, and they will, quitting is not an option.
Right.
Procrastination is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
So never in ownership in my business did I ever think, this is it, we're done.
Yeah.
You just immediately go into wartime CEO mode. And wartime CEO mode doesn't look like I'm screaming orders at people. It's the opposite. I'm hyper calm, hyper focused. Here's the task at hand. Here's the plan to accomplish the task. Go.
Yep.
And then you go back to the war room, and then people come back and they say, this is done, this is done. You go, perfect. Now you go from this to this thing.
Yep.
And they start knocking out that stuff. And so, figuring out who your wartime people are. And I can remember even coming back to the lawsuit situation, we had, 12 people on the call. And one person who doesn't work for us anymore, and I won't give any more details, I can remember said, it's Friday night. Can't this just wait till Monday?
Right.
No. Like, you've worked for me for years. I'm on vacation in Mexico. It's, 6 p.m. my time. Pacific Coast is 3. How often do I do an all hands call emergency and say, this is what we're doing tonight?
Right.
Almost never. And by the way, on the other side, if you're a CEO or a founder who considers everything an emergency, that's a problem as well.
It won't work.
You have to be able to identify, like, what is the actual do or die moments in the business. And then when it's there, you collect your war room personalities and you give them all a job to do, and then you trust them to do the job. And they come back to Slack, or again, we own online businesses. If you were in an actual conference room, it'd be different. And they say, done. And you go, cool. Now this. And they do that thing. And so when I look back at the staff that we had, every single person on that staff, this is years ago, this is 19, right? So six years ago, are still part of the staff, with the exception of one. And the one that isn't is the one that said, can't it wait till Monday?
Right. No, that's
I said,
spot
nope.
on. Yep. Because it never enters my mind. It has never entered my mind, ever. Maybe until you said it just now. That quitting is an option, that like the end is the option. Like, that's not the option. Are you kidding me?
That's
Like,
right.
you know how many hours there are between now and tomorrow morning? A lot.
We've talked a lot about like waking up early and working when people are sleeping. On the once every 3 years that you have to stay up all night long, how much time do you have, especially if you have, 8, 10, 12 people in the war room, can you get accomplished so that by the time the rest of the world wakes up, everything has changed?
That's right.
That's the key.
A good example, if you are an adult who has watched the movie Pulp Fiction,
Seen it?
there's a character on that movie who I think basically perfectly personifies what you're trying to go for, and that would be Harvey Keitel's character, Winston the Wolf.
Yeah, he's the best.
That's who you're looking to be.
Yeah.
It's just this very good example of completely calm and focused in the middle of complete disaster, right? And like, how do we cut out all the nonsense and get straight to the thing that's going to solve the problem at hand? That's really the key.
In the movie, you've got Vince, and they accidentally shoot a guy in the face in the back seat.
Right.
They have a gun go off, and now they get a mess in the back seat, and they need somebody to come in and clean up the mess.
Yep.
And that's the wolf.
There is no good way to quote any portion of what I just said with keeping it still family friendly. So we'll leave that. But there are certainly other examples. Here's another good one for you. In the movie, I think it was in Apollo 13, and I use this one as an example fairly frequently for our teams, and that is, you've got a spaceship that's it's in space, can't get back, and they're having issues turning the ship on at all. Basically, like, it's not working, the rocket.
Yeah.
And there's a scene at NASA where they get everybody into a room and they say, "This is what we have, and you have to figure it out." Like, you have to figure out how to get them home.
Oh, yeah. And they're like, we have duct tape and a sock and like whatever.
Exactly. Like a toothbrush, and it's MacGyver, and essentially, in many ways, the constraints will help you solve the problem, because you don't have infinity options. You have a finite number of options. And so your brain has only so far that it can go down any of the paths, any of the possible paths, right?
Sure.
So the constraints are actually helping you in these situations, which I think are actually really, really helpful. If you're a fan of movies, those are two good examples that you can go take a look at and see how it fits.
Well, and the point here again that I think is important is that the goal is to get the fastest from point A to point B and get the problem cleared up.
You got to get out of that chaos moment, get through the crisis. And getting through the crisis is going to mean there are going to be things that you don't do perfectly. There's going to be a bunch of, we're going to go clean some stuff up afterwards, whatever. But we got to get out of the emergency as soon as physically possible, because we can't think clearly when we're in the middle of chaos. So
that's right.
All right. So one of the things that, we've sort of hinted around, I think this is obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is that all of the normal rules of society are off during this time frame, completely off. So when we talk about things like sleep, everybody tells you it's critical that you get X amount of sleep, and sleep is extremely important. I'm very pro sleep. I want to be clear about this. I'm very pro sleep. When should you eat? When should you drink coffee?
None of it matters.
Stimulants, all of that stuff. None of it matters. All of it is out the window. The only thing that matters during this time frame is that you do whatever you have to do to make sure that you get through the crisis and you get through safely. So obviously, be careful. Don't do stupid things. But in general, make sure that you are as focused as you can possibly be, and that you basically don't pay attention to all of the other, like, all the rules are off. Like, the rules just go away. And now you've got other things that are going on. There's a couple other reasons that I say that, because I've had people before thinking about all of these other rules that matter. They're like, well, we have certain budget constraints, and we have certain other kinds of time constraints and people constraints and all these things. And I try to help them understand, even those are pretty much off during this time frame.
It depends on the thing. So the thing you were working with this past week, where it was like you were trying to solve a problem actually for a client, it's a little bit different. But there are times for us, and you as well in your business past, where it's 24 hours do or die.
Yeah.
Like, we don't solve the crisis. The budget doesn't matter. The payroll doesn't matter. None of it, because we're dead.
Yeah. People miss this. I think founders inherently get it. But the reason we're bringing this up is because employees tend to not get
That's
it.
right.
You have to make it explicit for them. You think about this every day. You go to bed, and if you're having a hard time sleeping, it's because every night that like it's a very thin line between you and the end of the company, right? And
Sure.
so like
You're the only one that knows.
Right.
I think this is actually really important too. And it comes back to, you've mentioned this several times about staying calm as a leader, rallying the troops, those sorts of things. Deep down inside, maybe no one else in your company knows how truly pivotal this moment is.
Yeah.
Maybe you've got a few executives that do, but for the most part, nobody does. You do. So if anyone had an excuse to freak the F out, it's you. But that's the one time you can't.
You cannot do it.
I don't know if you've seen this yet, but there's a really good documentary on, I think it's Netflix, the true story of Black Hawk Down.
Oh, I've been wanting to watch this. It's on my
so
list.
Good.
Yeah.
And one, some leadership was like, it was awful. But the one thing I could do is maintain my composure, stay calm, rally the troops, and tell them what they had to do. Because when someone is the leader and they're freaking out, people don't follow people who are freaking out.
That's right.
They follow people who are like, even though the sky is falling, I'm calm, I'm collected, I know what to do. Everybody do your job.
That's right.
That's the point. And you have to understand that like there's this variance in your, from your executive team down to your just normal employees of how much each know. And the reality is, you talk about social norms or like business norms, how much they know doesn't matter anymore.
Nope.
Your job is to like, if I have to explain all the details of how important this job is, that's a waste of time. You have to have built up enough social credibility and trust with your team so that when you say, hey guys, I need you to trust me here. Next 24 hours, do or die, I need everybody to do their job. I'll explain afterwards. I'm not going to ask you to do something I'm not going to do. If I ask you to stay up all night long, I'm going to stay up all night long. If I ask you to not eat, I'm not going to eat. Like, we're in this together in urgency and importance mode to save the business, to save the company. It's massive. And it's, again, this should not be happening very often. But if you've done what you should have done as a leader for the previous 5 years, 10 years, whatever, then you should be relatively surprised at how quickly the troops will rally and say, okay, like he's never led me astray up to this point. I'm going to do what he says or she says or whatever.
You made two incredibly important points. And I do think they're just, again, I'm just going to call them out. You said it. I'm going to say it again so everybody gets it. Number one, you cannot ask your team to do something you are not doing. You are going to lead from the front on this one.
Right.
Okay. And that means you're going to sleep less than everybody else. You're going to freak out zero.
You're not riding in the chariot. You're pulling the chariot.
There's no phone call. We have the weekend and we got to work all the way through the weekend, both nights through the weekend. I'm headed to Miami to play golf. Like, if that happens,
negative.
That's it.
You just lost your whole team.
You lost your whole team. And and your company's gone. Like, you can't do that. That is not a thing we do. The other hard thing to describe here is there's an emotional state that you're going to be in, and there's what you show everybody else.
That's right.
Now, I know that it's in the popular dialogue or whatever to feel your feelings and, make sure you get all that stuff out in front of everybody. But that's no good. That's no good.
Correct.
Absolutely terrible advice, especially in this scenario. I think it's generally terrible advice, but I also think that it is especially bad advice in this context. And the reason why is because you can't control those feelings, but you can control the behaviors. And the behaviors include things like your responses when you haven't had a lot of sleep and somebody says something that you think's kind of dumb, or they start getting off track on something. Like, you have to stay calm. It's going to be a little curt sometimes, sure, but that's just because we're trying to drive to this end state. And so
this is where, and I think, like you were saying, you don't think it's ever a good idea, but I think this is why good founders and business owners allow their actions to drive their emotions, not the other way around. You don't let your emotions drive your actions. And by the way, this doesn't just apply to business, because in these situations, There's a tremendous amount of overlap with family. There have been a handful of times. Ooh, here we go.
No, he's tearing up.
Where I have to go to my wife or my kids and go, okay, so I'm doing a terrible job of what I'm saying not to do. Let me do this again. You compose yourself. You tell your wife and your kids, hey, there's a big problem at the business, but daddy's going to fix it. But here's what I need from you. And if you've done the same thing with your family that you have with your employees, if you've invested decades in building trust and leadership, and that your family trusts you to get out of the situation, they don't have to understand the situation. They don't even need to know what it is, especially if you have littles. But just to say, hey, I know we said we were going to get hibachi tonight. We're not getting hibachi tonight. And this is why. But when daddy fixes the problem, we will, right? And so it's incredibly important that you take everything around. We've done episodes on being distraction free, but like you have to be able to sit down with your spouse and your kids and go, and that also might be, I'm getting in the car and I'm driving to the library and I'm going into a private room in the library or a wee workspace where there is no distraction to do the thing. And again, if you live in this all the time, and we all know people who like their whole life is like end of the world drama, sky is falling, this doesn't work. This is the boy who cries wolf.
It is.
And so it has to be very rare and few and far between. And when you handle it, like, again, there are times when I've been through this where I go into the room or the bathroom and I close the door and I scream and cry and whatever, but nobody hears me.
Yeah.
And I compose myself and I come out and go, okay, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, do what you got to do. That's the point, right?
That's the point.
There is absolutely real value in the team seeing you as a leader and taking their own emotional cues from you. This is actually not so hard to understand. I just did a flight to get down here on vacation. I'm in Florida. And the weather was terrible to get out of Boston. It was a mess. And flights are a really good example of this. You know, when you start hitting turbulence in a flight, experienced passengers, first of all, pretty much don't even look up from their computer.
Yeah,
I don't look
we
up
don't
from my
even
computer.
notice that it's going on. Yeah, right.
But if I were to look up and look at any member of staff, basically, like if the captain's like freaking out or something,
Right.
But if they're freaking out, I'm starting to freak out, right? Like
Sure.
that'd be the only circumstance where that's the
As
case.
much as we've flown, we've seen that happen a handful of times.
Handful of times.
Where they're like, they scurry to the jump seat and they buckle in
Real fast.
and everything's done.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is real.
Yeah. So that should help you understand, like, it's a very normal, natural thing to do, to look to the leader and say, they know more than I know in this context. So I'm going to look at them and see what's going on. That's what's happening. And you're the leader. So make sure that you are cognizant of that reality. Okay.
Yep.
Beyond that, I think one thing that's really, really important is to understand that one of your jobs in this process is to course correct. And you're going to need to do this for a couple of particular reasons. In the middle of a crisis, you know the goal is to get to the end state, to fix it, get out of the crisis, and then we can concentrate on those other things. For whatever reason, you'll have some employees that are actually just good at this, and they'll be fine. They'll be focused and be able to get the thing done. You've got some people who can't quite detach from some of the principled things that they've delivered on in the past. And I think specifically in software, we see this a lot around like certain best practices. We can't do this thing because we got to do these best practices. But remember, the rules are out. Rules don't matter anymore. We're done with those.
Right. During crisis mode.
During crisis mode, rules are done. You'll have to sometimes course correct and help them understand, listen, those are all good things. Those are all really good things. We want to make sure we do those things. Like we definitely want to not leave any broken windows. That's an example. It's a phrase we use in software. Make sure you fix up all the things. Leave it nicer than you found it. And sometimes people will get lost in that. And you could see like in a 24-hour, the clock is ticking. Somebody burning 4 hours on something dumb is like horrible. Like it could be the difference, right, between life and death. And so it's critical that as the leader, you're really well tuned in to what's going on the ground and doing these little nudges and course corrections for each of the people to help them understand. And sometimes that's literally just giving them permission.
Sure.
Someone's like, listen, you know that rule we always have that I say that you should always do? Yeah, right now that's suspended and I need you to do this other thing instead.
Right. And then you start to come out of this. So you've done what you're supposed to do. And often this is a 24-hour, 48-hour 3 days, whatever experience. It's, hyper urgent, hyper important crisis mode. I also think it's extremely important as an owner, as a founder, as a boss to celebrate the fact that we're no longer in crisis mode.
Yep.
To give your people an opportunity to decompress.
Yep.
And to go back to normal. And
Absolutely.
It takes real communication there to say, okay, you guys were awesome. Like, first off, go out and have dinner on the business. Go take your wife on a date. Do whatever, like spend some time with your kids. See you on Monday, whatever the thing is, and it'll be back to normal.
Yeah.
Because the same way we talk about context switching being difficult in the moment of going from a Pomodoro to distracted to back to the Pomodoro, it is far more difficult to go from non-crisis. So it's actually very easy to go from non-crisis mode to uber crisis mode because you're just instantly, you're thrown into the muck.
Yeah, that one's almost natural.
But coming out of the muck, it's often, and what you have to understand is that, and this is what I talk about in the book, that there are times when urgency is good, urgency is galvanizing for the team. You can see how much you can actually get accomplished as a team, all those things, but it is entirely unsustainable. So once you're out of the crisis, as a leader, you also have to help people understand now's the time to take a breath, to get some sleep, to get some food, to spend some time with your family, see you in a couple days at work. It's back to normal. All those rules we pulled are back in place.
They're all back.
And nothing changes. And the only thing that changes is we're now galvanized as a team, congratulate them, take zero of the credit for any of it.
Yeah. No matter what you did.
Yep. Put all the credit back on your people and congratulate them. Tell them how much you appreciate them. Tell them what a huge deal it was. They didn't have to work, 72 hours straight. And sometimes they do. And then you've got to figure out how to context switch back into normal mode. And this is often where I actually wondered, have you had this vacation set up in Florida for a while?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I wondered if you booked it because of the crisis mode you were, and I'll do that sometimes. Like,
yeah, no, it's smart.
It has just been completely nuts for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're going to Mexico for a week. Yeah. And crisis mode is over. And what I've found is that even for me, on the outside, the way I'm communicating and expressing myself to my employees, my staff, my family is still calm. But deep down inside, I'm still like, my adrenals are like fried. They're fatigued.
Mine will not stop for sometimes
3-4 days.
I mean, it's gone a week before.
Yeah, me too.
Pretty easy, where it was very, very hard for me to become normal again.
Yeah. This is actually why we've started to do. We actually do a few less vacations, but we do them longer. So we do a lot of 10 to 14 day vacations because if I'm coming out of stress mode, I go for a week. I don't relax till day 5 or 6, and then I get 1 day of vacation.
Yeah.
I want to go, if it takes me 5 or 6 days to relax, then I want an actual week of like.
To be in that relaxed mode.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and
that
not
makes
go right back into the crazy. And so
it's really hard. Like, I think this is another example of a place where I feel like, we talked about this before, we'll talk about it again. Like, we are not perfect. And I can tell you that the side of this that I am the worst at is the transition back. By far. I can get into the mode really quick. I think it's a muscle that's strong for me naturally for whatever reason. I think the other one isn't. And so I have learned some tricks that do make it better. And this is one of them. I agree completely. Like, if you can take a vacation, but even when you take the vacation, I think for me, it's more about all the mental things I've got to do. I've got to force myself to do. There's certain ways that I need to interact with Slack, for example, which is where almost everything happens in my world, so that I don't allow myself to get pulled back into it when it really isn't. We're not in the middle of crisis anymore, right? And so there's just, if for no other reason, you need to be ready when the next one comes.
Right.
And so for that reason, like, you need to figure out how to get out of it. It's very important.
Exercise, good food, good rest, good sleep, all those things like really matter because I want to come back ready to knock it out of the park again.
Yeah.
But I can't do that 24 hours after crisis mode.
No. That's absolutely right. There's a process that I think some of you may have never heard of before that I'll talk about. I think it's really, really good in an area of the world that we live in, sort of invented around a space called DevOps. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but the idea is it's sort of where software development and operations within an organization sort of meet. It's where those two things happen together. And normally the events of a technical crisis almost always involve things related to this field. And so they invented this idea called a blameless postmortem.
We do this all the time.
And they are so good because the idea of the blameless postmortem is to intentionally set a meeting. Again, I think it normally needs to be within 3 days of the event because it needs to be pretty fresh what happened still in your head. But you put the people who were in the war room together. There may be a few additional stakeholders that are involved, but for the most part, it's just going to be the people that were in that war room. And what you do is you go over everything that happened. How did it happen? What was the root cause of this thing? You figure out how you might have been able to respond earlier. Because remember, this is a game of time, right? You heard me say multiple times now, like the clock is ticking and I can hear it. Like in my head, I can hear it. And so every minute matters in this context. Could we have learned this 5 minutes earlier? Could we have learned it 5 days earlier? It's a huge difference as to the severity of the crisis based on how much time you have. And so you definitely want to think about how could we have built systems that would have alerted us to this earlier in the process so we could have had more time.
Yep.
And then you want to figure out what went well in the process and also what didn't go well. This stuff is actually really practical. In one that I did in 2012, my first company, we had one where we had done a very difficult software release. It was the first and most intense one I've ever had in my life, actually. And I think partially because I wasn't totally prepared for how to deal with it, both in and out of the crisis. Well, in still felt natural, but out of the crisis really didn't feel natural at that point. I was in my 20s and it was, but one of the practical things we said was we had all these people in an office at that point in time. And we didn't have any healthy food. Like we were all just eating garbage for like 3 days, which is not great. Like, so one of the things came out of it is like, let's keep some bananas around, or let's have somebody whose job it is to go up to the grocery store and just bring us some like fruit and stuff. Like, I don't know, like some meat and like just, I don't know, healthy things. But those are a good example of a place where you sort of drill into how could we do this better? How can we do this in a way that is the most effective? But I think the part of it that is the most important and the part that I think most people will miss is the blameless part of that blameless postmortem.
Yep.
It is possible. I've been in this situation, by the way, multiple times, where almost everyone on the planet would point to one human being. They would say, that human caused this thing.
Right.
They're the one that did it. And I would say, even if they are the one that knocked the domino over, you built a system that allowed them to knock that domino over.
Sure. Especially as a founder or owner. How did I create an atmosphere or a culture that allowed this to happen? That's on me.
We don't have a system in the world where there are nuclear weapons all over the place that 3-year-old toddlers can walk up and just hit a button and set them off, right?
Sure.
Because our systems are supposed to keep that from happening.
Right.
And so even if you have a malevolent actor, even if you have someone who wants to do harm, your system should protect against that.
Right.
So the blameless postmortem, the idea of the blameless postmortem is to figure out how to update and modify the process. And this plays so well into our previous podcast because we just had podcasts where we talked about standard operating procedures and playbooks. And this is where those get modified, right?
Yep.
So we go look at those, we figure out something in this process broke somewhere. Maybe it's that we didn't have one. Maybe we didn't have a standard operating procedure or a playbook. But when you come out of the end of blameless postmortem, first of all, there's kind of a document that you want to come up with, and they can be different depending on your company. But the net effect should ultimately be a modification or a new playbook or standard operating procedure that helps the team understand this is what we are changing so that this thing never happens in the future.
Yep.
Now, you also want to be sure that that the whole team understands we're just saying this thing. Other ones are going to happen in the future.
Sure.
And I think that is hard for some people to swallow, but it is the reality. So yeah, that's what you do.
One of the things we do with the postmortem that has worked really well for us is that I have the executives, especially those that are in the war room, write not an Amazon 6-page paper, but like what we call a 1-pager, which if it's 2 pages is fine.
Yeah.
But basically a white paper of that exact thing. And what I found is when they write that, when I write it, I still have a lot of emotions attached to the thing. And so you write it, but you don't post it. You save it in drafts. We do all our stuff on Basecamp. Save it in drafts. And tomorrow morning when you get up, you go back through it and you edit it and you make sure that the blame is pulled out and you focus on the blameless piece. And then when you have the meeting, so often we'll send those papers and maybe we read them ahead of time, or maybe the first 20 minutes of the meeting is we're just going to read through the postmortem write-ups, 3, 4, 5 postmortem write-ups. They're all a page long.
Yep.
And then discuss the thing. Because what I found is within 2 or 3 days of crisis mode, there are often still a lot of people that are still very emotionally attached to the thing that happened. And by forcing yourself to write the thing, it's like when you make a post on X or something and you're like, I don't know if I should post this. You're like, just don't. Just save it as a draft and tomorrow see what it looks like.
Yeah.
And almost like 99% of the time you're just like, okay, I don't need to post that. Right. And so
there's 2 good principles, by the way, that come out of that I feel like are also important. One of them was Buffett that always said, you can always tell somebody to go to hell tomorrow.
Right.
Right. I think it's an important one. It's like, get that deep in your brain. The second one was that Lincoln did this all the time.
Yeah.
Like apparently, if you study Lincoln at all, Lincoln had a giant pile of letters never sent.
Right.
And it was the whole purpose was to
the
write
people
it.
to kill list from Billy Madison.
Like, oh, it's funny.
And then you wait till tomorrow. And then, and so, we do that. And then we do our postmortem and then we go, okay, here's the lessons learned. We've done that with board meetings. And, anytime something is like, okay, this didn't go the way we thought it was going to go, why, and take out all the blame. And how can we prepare for this better next time? What systems do we need to put in place? We write that out very simply, not a 6-page essay, 1-pager. And then we have that meeting and we focus on those documents so that it keeps us from diving back into emotional mode. And so that's crisis. And so for those of you guys who are out there, men and ladies both, who are founders and entrepreneurs and owners, like crisis mode will occur. That we know. Those days are going to happen. Days like we had last week where you were up all night long working on a crisis mode for a customer. I had the stomach flu. There was just nothing that we could do that you figure out, okay, how do I get through the crisis?
Yep.
And once you're through the crisis, you go, okay, like how now do I handle coming out of crisis mode and going back to normal mode?
Yep. And
that's really important. It's as important as moving into crisis mode. But in crisis mode, being the leader that your business needs, staying calm, understanding a process and procedure, order of operations, very clear, very detailed, so that you can tell each person, this is what I need you to do, this is what I need you to do, this is what I need you to do, this is what I'm going to do, will allow you to galvanize the team because they then understand that when the crap hits the fan, you're not going to leave them.
That's right.
And I think that's really what everybody wants to know. Like when stuff really goes bad, even if it's, if I'm an employee, even if it's my fault, my boss isn't going to fire me because of X.
Yeah.
Or it's this like, okay, we're in this together. We solved the problem together. We did the postmortem. We didn't blame. And now we've learned from this. Because if you go through the crisis and you never learn, then the next crisis is
wasted opportunity.
Is as bad or worse. And so
definitely.
There you go. There's crisis mode for the Build Your Business podcast with Matt and Chris Reynolds. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being patient with us for missing last week. Hope you guys have a great weekend this weekend. Happy Friday to you. We'll see you next Friday. I think we're going to talk about the game plan because we kind of led into that in our previous podcast. And but this was a great opportunity while it was fresh in our mind to talk about what crisis mode looked like.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening. We'd love a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, ratings have been great, top 50 every week, which has been fantastic. And wild to see the names that, the podcasts that we listen to, like Founders and Hormozy and Tim Ferriss and like My First Million. And like we're beating all those guys. It's really bizarre. So thank you so much for listening, for giving us your time. Hope you're getting value out of this. If you do, again, we'd love a 5-star review. Share it with a friend or family member. We'll see you guys next Friday.